Welcome to Module 15. We're in the documentation guide in Section B, and we will be discussing square feet and square yard pay items. Here we have the top of page B3 in the doc guide with our pay items of square foot and square yard. Some of the items we will go over are PCC sidewalk, pavement patching, base course widening, and slope wall construction. Here we have our accuracy of measurements, individual measurements to the nearest tenth of a square foot or square yard. Please note, individual dimensions must be to at least to the tenth of a foot. Again, our required documentation are field measurements or calculations built according to standard, agreement to plan quantity. There may be depth checks required. For sidewalks, you may also need to collect cross-slope verifications. On page F36, we have the famous sidewalk IDR that you've seen numerous times. It is a square foot item. Simply, we have a width and a length. We multiply the two together, we get square feet, and we document it up on our IDR with our quantity and our units. We've got our evidence material inspection. Here we have our depth checks, and over here we have our cross slope checks. What are we doing now? This looks like patching. Here we go. Here we have full depth, full lane removal for patching. That is the most common type of patching for IDOT. And we can see that here in the patching, we've excavated down to the existing subgrade or to the bottom of the existing pavement layers. Looks like maybe we have some HMA over concrete. We can see this concrete's not in great shape. Probably why we're patching it. Looking a little more in depth at our patching, here's a cross-sectional view of a patching area. Here we have the existing pavement thickness. We might have some granular base or sub-base material and some subgrade beneath that. The red box represents the section that we're going to remove. From left to right on the page would be the direction of travel, one way or the other way. We call that direction the patched length. Into the page would be our lane width. That's most typical. One of the most common issues we find in patching is when the pavement thickness is different than plan. So if our plan thickness is thicker or greater than our existing, we have to account for that change. On the other side, if our plan thickness is thinner than the actual pavement or our existing is greater than the plan, we need a mechanism to adjust payment to the contractor. We can't change their bid price, but we can change the quantity that we pay them to adjust for a patch that was thicker or thinner than was anticipated. We will show you in the method of measurement in pavement patching, Article 44210, using the method for adjusting plan quantity for a change in the existing pavement thickness different than plan. Here's a representation of how we replace our pavement structure when we patch. We always cut and excavate and remove down to the bottom of the existing pavement layer, and we always replace our materials in kind. So pavement area gets pavement. If we get into the subgrade, we replace the subgrade with subgrade. Some common patching issues. We're going out here and we've saw cut our patch here, and we've done the saw cuts in the lane width. We take the patch out, and some of the subgrade adheres to the removed pavement. No fault of the contractor. It's stuck to the concrete or the asphalt, and we pulled it out. We would have to replace the material in kind. So we're replacing pavement with pavement, subgrades with subgrades, or subbase with subbase. We never want to put pavement back in this area under the subgrade or subbase, because that'll create a key or lock in the pavement so that it can't move side to side, back and forth with thermal expansion and contraction. So we would want to replace like this. Here was our existing pavement, so we're going to replace our new patch pavement down to the level of the top of the subbase, and then we're going to replace the subbase and subgrade with, more than likely this will be the same material but some type of granular material in kind, same type of materials that we're replacing. That can happen if we adhere to the bottom of the pavement when we remove it. Sometimes the subbase or subgrade is unstable, and we will direct the contractor to remove and replace it. Sometimes the contractor just misses and they over excavate. They remove it on their own. If they remove it on their own, we're not going to pay for it, and we're not going to let them pour put paving materials beneath the level of the existing.
Here we have the 2022 Spec Book, page 271.
It is the article or section 442, Pavement Patching, all about patching our pavements. There are two items we have to discuss before we get to the measurement portion. One is the class of patch. The class of patch is determined by what type of construction and also what materials are being used as the patch material. Classes A, B, and C all use Portland cement concrete. Class A is reinforced, Class B uses dowel bars or tie bars, and Class C has no reinforcement whatsoever. No dowel bars, no tie bars, no reinforcement. Class D is HMA replacement only, hot mix asphalt. The last class of patch is pavement patching. This is the contractor's option of either C or D, either plain concrete or hot mix asphalt. The reason we have pavement patching, if we're not concerned with the material that's going into the patch, we give it to the contractor to either use concrete or HMA depending on the location of the contract and also maybe the nearest concrete plant or HMA plant. We might get a better price if we let the contractor choose, might get better bids or more response on the bidding. The other thing is, depending on the time of year we're patching, if we're during the cold weather seasons, contractor might want to use concrete because the HMA plants aren't up and running. Second concept is the type. Type 1, 2, 3, and 4. The type of patch is based on the size, the plan dimensions of that patch, the length and width, the lane width or partial width, and then also the length along the direction of travel. Here we have type 1s are less than 5 square yards. Type 2s are 5 square yards up to 15 square yards. Type 3s are 15 up to 25 square yards, and type 4s are 25 square yards or more. So we have a class of type, that's the construction and materials. They have the type of patch, which is based on the planned size of that patch. Here, continuing on in pavement patching,
on page 282 and 283 of the 2022 Spec Book,
we have Article 442.10, which is the method of measurement for pavement patching. We talked before about adjusting the quantity of pavement to the contractor based on whether the existing pavement is thicker than plan or thinner than plan. Here we have a table that tells us what type of quantity change we have depending on a change in thickness. So we're going to calculate a percent change in thickness from plan to actual, and then we're going to pick a change of quantity based on the range of thickness change that we have. If our existing pavement is thicker, these would be an addition of quantity. If our change in thickness is thinner, these would be subtraction of quantity. So here we go. Up to 15%, from 0 to 15% change, there is no change in quantity. We're considering that just part of the construction process, and there is no change in quantity paid to the contractor. From 15 to just below 20% change in thickness, we're going to give a 10% change in quantity. You can see the rest of them here from 20 to 30, we're going to give them 15% change.
And from 30 to less than 50%, we're going to give them a 20% change in quantity. Please note right below the table, it says if the thickness of the existing pavement varies by 50% or more from that shown on the plans, the character of the work will be considered significantly changed and an adjustment to the contract will be made according to Article 104.02.
Very important. You calculate this change in thickness. It is actual minus plan divided by plan. That gives us our number, but we have to go to this column right here to get our actual change in quantity. Don't use the change in thickness as our change in quantity. It's a sliding scale based on this chart. Okay, page F65 in your doc guide is an example of a field book entry for some pavement patching. One of the most important things that we do first in patching is we go lay out the dimensions of the patch. Most of the time you're going to be a full lane width, whatever that lane might be. This one was 12-foot lane. And then we're going to lay out the length. We're actually going to mark where the contractor should cut, remove, and replace. So we went out, we laid out our patches, okay? The contractor saw cuts them. They remove the material, the existing pavement material, down to the sub-base, base, or base course, whatever's down there underneath the existing pavement. Then we measure. We re-measure to verify that what they actually cut, these boundaries, is what we marked or staked out in the field. So looking at this field book, I don't see any discrepancies, so the contractor cut exactly what we asked. There's a thickness, right? Our pay item is pavement patching, 10. So that means we are expecting the existing pavement to be 10 inches thick by plan. So we go out and we take a depth check. If you remember back to depth checks, all right, doc guide, page A17 to 19. We have to record at least one depth check per patch. So we took one depth check and we got 10 inches. Well, that's exactly what we expected, so there's no change in quantity. We can take our dimensions, 12.7 and 12.3. We can average them and multiply by our 12-foot lane width. Don't forget to convert 1 square yard per 9 square feet. So we divide by 9 and we get 16.7 square yards. So that is greater than 15, right? But less than 25. So we are in a type 3. Okay, 16.7 square yards paid for that type 3 on patch number 8. Patch number 9 was 5 feet long. We took a depth check. It was also 10 inches. Great. That meets our plan. There's no adjustment necessary. Take 5 feet times our width, 12 feet. Convert our units to square yards. We get 6.7 square yards. That is less than 15 but greater than 5, so I'm a type 2. Right? So we got 6.7 square yards as a type 2 patch for patch number 9. We get to patch number 10. We get our dimensions, that's great, but our first depth check is 14 inches. What was our plan? 10 inches. That seems quite a bit different. So we took a couple more depth checks. Here we got 13.8, 14.2. We are allowed to take an average of all depth checks that are recorded. Our average was 14 inches. Well, that's pretty different than 10. So we better check to see what type of percent change we had. So we take our actual 14 inches right here, subtract our plan, 10 inches, and divide by our plan, 10 inches. Don't always use 10. You have to refer to your pay item right here to know what the plan thickness was supposed to be. This could be any number. It doesn't have to be 10. It could be 8, could be 12, could be 14, but we're looking at our pay item description. That's what we're using for our plan numbers here. So we get 14 minus 10 divided by 10 equals a 40% change in thickness for this patch. It was thicker by 40%. So we go to our chart on page 258, and for a 30% and greater change in thickness, here we go. We have an increased quantity by 20%. Right? We're looking at that table that's on the right-hand side for our actual quantity change. Okay, so I know I need to change my quantity by 20%. It increased, so I'm going to increase my quantity. Here, let's do our calculation. We got our length, 18.4, 12 feet wide. So I got 18.4 times 12. Do my conversion to square yards, divide by 9. I get 24.5 square yards. I need to increase this number by 20%. So I can take 1 plus or 100 plus 20%. I get 1.20. I multiply that by 24.5, which was my actual area, and I get a pay quantity of 29.4 square yards. Well, what type of patch is it? Tricky. Our actual area determines the type of patch. So at 24.5 square yards, I'm less than 25 square yards, but I'm greater than 15, so I will be a type 3. So I take my pay quantity and put it in the type 3, 24.9. The increase or decrease in quantity never changes which type. The type of patch is based on the planned dimensions as cut and filled in the field. Okay, here we've got our measure by, count by, check by. Awesome. Can total it up for our 2 pay items. I do want to point that out, that the type 2 patches is 1 pay item, and type 3 patches is a different pay item because there might be a different bid price between the two of them. All right, back to the workbook. Workbook page 20. We have a pavement patching problem. Here we have 2 pay items. right? We have patching, we have type 2s and type 3 patches. How thick are our patches supposed to be? What's the plan? 10 inches. Yesterday we laid out 3 patches and we give the stations and the dimensions of what we laid out. After the patching operations are completed, after the removal, we go back and we measure the patches, and this is what we measured after they removed. We have all the material inspections. We want to complete the field book entry on page 21 in the workbook to complete this day of patching with these 3 patches and calculate our final pay quantities. So here on workbook page 21 is your blank field book. It's already set up with your description and your pay items. We've got our patches, we've got some depth checks. We need you to fill in the dimensions of what we're going to pay for and complete this field book entry as your source document. You may want to pause your video and work on this problem a little bit. We will go over the solution in just a moment. Okay, hopefully you paused the video and worked on this problem. The answer is on workbook page 39, and here is our completed field book. We have an 8-foot patch, number 11. We laid it out at 8. They cut it at 8. We're happy. We can do our math. 8 feet times 12 feet, divide by 9 to convert my units. I get 10.7 square yards. That's less than 15 but greater than 5, so I'm a type 2. My depth check was 10 inches. What's my plan? 10 inches also, so no adjustment is required. I get to patch 12. Uh-oh. Did you figure out our little wrinkle in this problem? Yeah, right. We laid out the patch at 9 feet on either side, the length, but the contractor cut 10 feet. They cut an extra feet. They didn't notify us of anything. They just did it on their own. So we're going to pay for what we asked for or what we marked out. That'd be the 9 feet. So here I got my math. 9 feet in length by 12 feet wide. Do my conversion. Divide by 9 to get square yards. So I have 12.0 square yards. Okay. 12.0 is less than 15, greater than 5. So I'm a type 2. There's my 12.0 square yards. We did take a depth check. It was 12.2 inches. We can see that's a pretty small change. We could run the formula. It might be a better practice to do that, but we can see pretty closely that's not even going to be a 15% change. So we did make a note to whoever's checking that there was no adjustment that was required. We get to our last patch, patch 13. We laid it out 11 feet long. They cut it 11 feet long. Great. So my quantity is 11 feet by 12 feet wide. Convert from square feet to square yards, divide by 9. I get 24.7 square yards. Perfect. However, look at this. Oh, not 24. That's 14.7. We took a depth check and it was 12 inches. Well, that's not 10, so I better check to see if I need an adjustment. Here we go. Actual of 12 minus the plan of 10, which I get from my pay item description, divided by my plan thickness, tells me it's a 20% increase in thickness, right? So that's the left-hand column of our chart on page 258. Now I go over to the right-hand column, and it tells me that a 20% change in thickness equates to a 15% increase of quantity, right? Increase the quantity by 15% because I had a greater thickness in the field than I had planned on. Easiest way to do that is multiply by 1 plus the decimal percent, or 1.15 times my calculated 14.7, gives me a total pay quantity of 16.9 square yards, right? What type of patch is this? Aha, 14.7 is less than 15, greater than 5, so it's going to be my type 2, right? It's the actual plan area of the patch, not the adjusted quantity, that determines type. So I can add them all up for the day, and they're all type 2 patches, and away we go. All right. On workbook page 40, we have an example of when the thickness decreases and we have a decrease in quantity. Here we have the same numbers that you had in your problem. However, the last patch, instead of being deeper, 12 inches, it is now thinner. it is 8.2 inches for my depth check. That is different than 10, so I better make a check. Here I have my actual 8.2 minus my plan of 10 inches divided by my plan of 10 inches. It tells me it's a minus 18% change, so a decrease of 18%. I look at my chart. For a decrease of 18%, I have a change in quantity of 10%, and this is a decrease because I was thinner. So I can take 1 minus the decimal of my percent change. So 1 minus 0.1 is 0.9 times my calculated area, 14.7, gives me 13.2 square yards. All right. On page F66, we have an IDR representing PCC base course widening. How deep? 9 inches. Okay. My pay item number, my description. Here's my location. It says see field book 3 for my depth checks. Because my pay item ends in a number, I need depth checks. They're supposed to be 9 inches. It also states in Article 109.01, the pay width for the pavement base courses shall be the exact horizontal dimensions shown in the plans or ordered in writing. So we have 3 foot wide, so we're going to use what's on the plan. They have to give us at least 3 feet, so we're taking measurements in the field to make sure it's at least 3 feet, but I'm only going to pay what it says on the plan. Then I'm going to measure my actual lengths. Here I got the left side, the right side, my actual lengths, times my width, converting because this is square yards, so I got to convert from square feet to square yards, divide by 9, and I get my quantities on each side of the road for this widening. Add them together, I get my total quantity. That goes up here, my total quantity plus my units, and I'm happy. What type of construction are we looking at here? Well, we've got a bridge abutment up here, right? So this must be slope walls, right? Here we have some formwork. We've got some anchor walls or toe walls. We've got some at the top, right? To keep this slab we're going to cast on top of here from sliding, we anchor it into the ground. We might put it in the toe to get some resistance down there. Let's take a look. Here we have some poured panels. It's very common for them to pour panels, leave a gap, pour a panel, leave a gap, and then the next time they'll come back and they'll infill between these panels. All right, it's pretty difficult to pour the whole thing at one time. One of the most important things about slope wall, we don't pay for any of the length or dimension of those anchor walls or the toe walls. So you might have the anchor wall at the top that goes into the slope. We don't measure that for payment. We will measure it to make sure it meets the plans for our dimensions, but we're not going to measure it for payment. The other item of measuring slope wall, when we're measuring the length, so it's a square yard item, so we have a length and a width. We're going to measure along the natural surface of that slope wall. So we're going to get this slopey part, and then we'll also get the flat part. That will be the entire length that we will measure, and then we'll measure the width of the slope wall. Although this one will be measured from way back here all the way up to this corner. Okay. Construction inspection. Make sure they're picking this mesh up into the concrete. Don't let it be on the bottom. It does no good if this reinforcement is laying on the ground, the concrete's laying on top of that wire mesh. Okay, that's not good. The other thing, as they're filling these and they have these formworks, make sure they're crumbing out or scooping out these side pieces here that are kind of flat, maybe triangular shaped, right? They're sloping back up to the top where they poured. We don't want those to stay in there when they pour this panel. On page F67, right there, we have another IDR representing our slope wall construction. Here we have our pay item number. Slope wall, 4 inches. So we need some depth checks that tell us it was at least 4 inches thick. It was on the south abutment. Down here we have our measurements. Okay, so here's our width right here and our length. This person even showed a diagram that shows that the length was on the slope. So we're going to count all of this, but we're not going to count these toe or anchor walls. All right. So I have my two lengths and a distance between them, perpendicular, parallel. So I got a parallelogram. I can average these two sides, multiply by the distance between them. Here I'm dividing by 9 to convert to my square yard. I get my square yards. Quantity in units up here. and see the field book for depth checks.